My pregnant sister vanished the morning of her baby shower. I was not prepared for what I'd find when I went looking for her. She was 8 months pregnant and had texted me that morning saying she was so excited for the party. But then she no-showed. Her boyfriend Tyson arrived alone, looking confused. "She left before me," he said. "Said she had to pick something up and would meet me here." We called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. After 2 hours, my mom was panicking, and Tyson and I went back to their apartment to look for her. The door was unlocked, and Belle's purse was on the counter, but she was gone. "This isn't like her," Tyson kept saying, pacing around. "She's been so careful about the pregnancy, she wouldn't just disappear." I checked her closet while Tyson searched the bathroom, and that's when I found them. 4 flesh-colored pads with straps, each a different size, labeled by month. My hands went numb as I pulled them out. "Tyson, come look at this," I called. He stood in the doorway staring at the fake pregnancy bellies. "She's been faking the pregnancy," I said. "No, I've been to appointments with her," Tyson said. "Well, I've driven her to appointments. She always made me wait in the car. Always said she was too nervous." I grabbed Belle's laptop while he stood there processing. Her search history made my stomach turn. How to fake pregnancy symptoms, realistic belly progression, where to buy ultrasound photos. I showed Tyson the screen and he sat down hard on the bed. "But why?" he said. "Why would she do this? We weren't trying for a baby. We weren't even sure if we'd keep it. We need to find her," I said. "We need answers." And something made her run today. Tyson mentioned she'd been getting strange phone calls lately, always stepping outside to take them. She said it was the doctor's office, but she seemed upset after. I checked her phone records online since I was still on her family plan. The calls were all from the same number, and when I Googled it, nothing came up. But when I did a reverse lookup, it belonged to Riverside Hospital's psychiatric ward. "Why would the psych ward be calling her?" Tyson asked. We drove to the hospital and he convinced them to check if Belle was a patient. A nurse overheard us and pulled us aside. "Are you looking for the woman who's been coming to our prenatal classes? She's not enrolled but sits in the back. We had to ask her to leave yesterday because she was making other mothers uncomfortable with her questions." The nurse showed us security footage of Belle following a teenage girl through the parking garage. She was especially interested in this young girl who comes alone. Back at the apartment, I searched more carefully while Tyson made calls to Belle's friends. Under the bathroom sink, I found hospital scrubs still in packaging and a fake hospital ID badge. The name on it was Ariana Miley, but the photo spot was empty. In the kitchen junk drawer, I found receipts for baby formula, diapers, and a car seat, all bought with cash over the past month. "She was planning to take someone's baby," I said, feeling sick. I found Belle's tablet hidden under the couch and discovered she'd been browsing real estate listings in Oregon, saving houses for rent under the name Ariana Miley. One had an application filled out saying she was a single mother with a newborn, moving for a fresh start. The move-in date was 3 days from now. "She was going to steal a baby and disappear," I said. Tyson was shaking. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Belle at a gas station 2 hours away, but she wasn't alone. Someone in hospital scrubs was with her, face obscured by a baseball cap. "Who is that?" I asked, showing Tyson. "I don't know, but look at the timestamp. This was taken an hour ago," he said. We drove to that gas station, and during the drive, Tyson kept methodically checking his phone, like this was his last chance at something. The clerk at the gas station remembered Belle. She bought a bunch of supplies, blankets, bottles, formula. Her friend paid for everything. The clerk couldn't describe the friend, said they stayed in the car. In the parking lot, I found something that made my blood run cold. On the ground was a maternity ward hospital bracelet, with today's date and a patient number, but no name. "This is from today," I said. "This is someone's who actually gave birth today." Tyson took the bracelet and studied it. "We should take this to the police," he said. But instead of heading toward the car, he walked to the dumpster and threw it in. "Why did you do that?" He just ran his hand through his hair. "I don't know. I panicked. I don't want them to think Belle did something to a real mother." That's when I noticed things I'd overlooked all day. Tyson's phone had been buzzing with texts he wasn't checking. When we were at the apartment, he'd searched the bathroom but had found nothing, even though I found the scrubs and ID there later. He'd even been the one to suggest we leave the hospital instead of talking to security about the footage. "Tyson," I said slowly, my heart pounding, "were you involved in this?" He backs up against his car and his hands are shaking. The parking lot lights make his face look yellow and sick. He pulls his phone out and his fingers fumble with it before he finally gets it unlocked. He holds it out to me and I see text messages from Belle going back weeks. I scroll through them and my stomach turns. Belle talking about saving a baby from a mother who doesn't deserve it. Belle asking Tyson if he thinks it's wrong to take something that should have been yours. Belle saying she was meant to be a mother, and this is her only chance. Tyson keeps saying he thought it was just pregnancy hormones making her talk crazy. He says he never thought she would actually do anything. I don't believe him, but I screenshot every single message on my phone before he can change his mind. My hands shake so bad I almost drop my phone twice. I pull up Detective Caroline Moss's number that she gave me at the hospital and I call her. She answers on the second ring and I tell her where we are and what we found. She says she's on her way and tells me to stay in my car with the doors locked. I get in my car, but I watch Tyson through the windshield. He sits down on the curb and puts his head in his hands. 20 minutes later, Detective Moss pulls into the parking lot with 2 other police cars. She gets out wearing jeans and a jacket like she was home when I called. She walks straight to the dumpster and pulls on gloves from her pocket. She reaches in and pulls out the hospital bracelet using just 2 fingers. She holds it up to the light and studies it before putting it in a plastic bag one of the other officers hands her. Then she walks over to Tyson and looks down at him. I can't hear what she says, but Tyson looks up at her and then puts his hands behind his back without her even asking. The other officers help him stand up and walk him to one of the police cars. Detective Moss comes over to my car and taps on the window. I roll it down and she asks me to follow them to the station. The drive takes 30 minutes and I keep looking in my rearview mirror at the police car with Tyson in the back. At the station, Detective Moss takes me to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. She brings me water and sits down across from me. She asks me to start from the beginning and tell her everything. I spend 2 hours going through it all. Finding the fake pregnancy bellies in Belle's closet, the laptop search history, the phone calls from the psychiatric ward, the hospital nurse showing us footage of Belle following that teenage girl, the scrubs and fake ID badge under the bathroom sink, the Oregon rental application, the anonymous text with Belle's photo, the gas station clerk who remembered Belle buying baby supplies, finding the hospital bracelet in the parking lot, Tyson throwing it away, his phone buzzing all day with texts he wouldn't check, how he searched the bathroom but somehow missed all the evidence I found there later, how he wanted to leave the hospital instead of talking to security. Detective Moss takes notes the whole time and doesn't interrupt me once. When I finish, she looks at me and says she knows how hard this must be. She says reporting your own sister takes courage. I don't feel courageous. I feel sick and scared and like I don't know my own family anymore. Detective Moss leaves the room and comes back with the hospital bracelet in its evidence bag. Under the bright lights in the station, I can see it better. There's a patient number printed on it and a date stamp from this morning. Detective Moss makes a phone call while I sit there staring at the bracelet. She talks to someone at the hospital and writes down information. When she hangs up, she tells me the patient number belongs to a 17-year-old girl who gave birth at 8:30 this morning. The hospital confirms a bracelet went missing from a supply cart near the maternity ward around 10 a.m. My stomach drops thinking about Belle being that close to a real newborn baby. Detective Moss goes to talk to Tyson in another room. I sit alone for almost an hour before she comes back. She sits down and tells me Tyson admitted he's known about the fake pregnancy since month 4. He says he accidentally saw the belly pads in Belle's closet when he was looking for something. Belle begged him not to tell anyone. She said she would figure it out and make it real somehow. Tyson says he was too scared and ashamed to confront the truth, so he just went along with it. Detective Moss's face when she tells me this makes it clear what she thinks of his choices. She pulls out her laptop and turns it so I can see the screen. It's security footage from the hospital dated today. The timestamp says 9:47 a.m. Belle is standing in the maternity ward hallway wearing scrubs that look exactly like the ones we found at the apartment. She's watching the nurse's station like she's studying it. A nurse walks past pushing a cart and Belle reaches toward it. Then someone else comes around the corner, and Belle pulls her hand back and walks away. Detective Moss plays it again, and I watch my sister actively planning to steal someone's baby. The footage confirms everything we suspected. I ask to use my phone, and Detective Moss says yes. I call Mom, and she answers immediately asking if I found Belle. I have to tell her everything. The fake pregnancy, the hospital footage, the plan to take a teenager's baby. Mom doesn't believe me at first. She keeps saying Belle would never do something like this. But when I describe the fake belly pads labeled by month and tell her about the security footage of Belle in the maternity ward this morning, she goes quiet. I can hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, she whispers, "Where is she now?" I realize I don't have an answer. Detective Moss takes the phone and talks to Mom. She explains they're putting out an alert for Belle's car. She's contacting every hospital within 3 hours to warn their maternity wards. She tells Mom that Belle might try another hospital if she's desperate enough. We need to find her before she approaches another vulnerable mother. Hearing my sister described as a threat to vulnerable mothers makes everything feel unreal. Detective Moss hangs up and makes more calls. I sit there listening to her coordinate with other police departments and hospital security teams. The reality that my sister is now the subject of an active police search hits me. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is a criminal investigation. Around midnight, Detective Moss tells me I can leave. Tyson is being held for more questioning. She says they'll probably charge him with obstruction at minimum. Maybe more depending on what else they find. I don't care what happens to Tyson right now. I just want to find Belle before she does something that can't be undone. I drive to Mom's house because I can't face going home to my empty apartment. When I walk in, Mom is sitting in the dark living room. All the baby shower decorations are still up from this morning. Pink and blue streamers hanging from the ceiling. A banner that says congratulations. Balloons tied to chairs. Presents stacked on the table that nobody opened. Mom is just sitting there in the middle of it all staring at nothing. I sit down next to her on the couch and neither of us says anything for a long time. Finally, Mom gets up and goes to her bedroom, coming back with 3 photo albums and a shoebox full of loose pictures. We spread them out on the coffee table and start going through them, looking for some sign we missed, some clue that would explain how Belle got to this point. There are pictures of Belle as a kid, Belle in high school, Belle at family gatherings. Mom pulls out a photo from last year. Belle at her friend Rachel's house for a barbecue. Rachel had just announced her pregnancy and everyone looked happy. Mom stares at the photo for a minute and then says, Rachel lost the baby at 12 weeks. Belle took it really hard, harder than Rachel even. She kept talking about how it was a sign, how some people were meant to be mothers and others weren't, how Rachel would get another chance because she deserved it. We thought she was just being supportive, but now it sounds different. Mom finds more photos from around that time, and Belle looks different in them, more intense somehow. In one picture, she's holding Rachel's ultrasound photo and staring at it like it's the most important thing in the world. Mom starts crying again, and I hold her hand while we keep looking through the pictures. Around 3 a.m, we finally give up and try to sleep, but I just lie on Mom's couch staring at the ceiling, thinking about my sister and wondering when exactly she stopped being the person I thought I knew. My phone rings at 7:30 and it's Detective Moss. Belle's car was spotted at a motel 40 miles north of here. Officers got there as fast as they could, but Belle had already checked out. The desk clerk remembered her, though. Said she spent a long time asking questions about the area, specifically which nearby towns had hospitals with maternity wards. My hands go numb holding the phone and I have to sit down on the edge of the couch. Detective Moss says they're checking security footage from the motel and nearby gas stations, trying to figure out which direction Belle went. She asks if I can come to Belle's apartment in an hour to help with a more thorough search now that it's officially a crime scene. I wake Mom up and tell her about the call and she just nods, looking exhausted and scared. I meet Detective Moss at the apartment and there's yellow tape across the door now. She has gloves and evidence bags and a camera. We start in the bedroom and Detective Moss opens the nightstand drawer, pulling out everything carefully. Under some old magazines, she finds a spiral notebook with a plain black cover. She opens it and I see pages and pages of handwriting. Belle's handwriting. The first entry is dated 4 months ago. It's a list of pregnant women Belle had seen around town with notes about each one. Sarah at the grocery store, due in August, always with her husband. Jennifer at the coffee shop, due in September, seems tired. Allison at the bus stop, due in November, always alone. The notes get more detailed as the pages go on. Allison's schedule, which entrance she uses at the hospital, that she takes the number 7 bus. Detective Moss photographs every page while I stand there trying not to be sick. 3 weeks ago, Belle wrote an entry that makes my blood run cold. She's comparing different women, talking about which baby would be the right choice. She writes about mothers who don't deserve their blessings, young girls who got pregnant by accident and don't understand the gift they've been given. She writes about Allison specifically, how she's perfect because she's alone and scared and wouldn't be able to fight back. Detective Moss photographs this page multiple times from different angles. I sit down on the floor because my legs won't hold me up anymore. This isn't just mental illness, this is calculated, this is predatory. Belle spent months watching these women, studying them, planning which baby to take. Detective Moss puts her hand on my shoulder and asks if I'm okay, and I can't answer because I'm not okay. Nothing is okay. We keep searching, and in the dresser drawer under Belle's socks, Detective Moss finds a phone I've never seen before. It's a cheap burner phone with a cracked screen. She turns it on, and there are only 3 contacts saved. One is labeled A, one is labeled Property, and one is labeled Supplies. Detective Moss calls her partner and tells him to start the subpoena process for the call records. She asks me if I know who any of these contacts might be, and I shake my head. The A could be anyone. Property is probably the landlord in Oregon. Supplies might be the baby store where Belle bought all that stuff. Detective Moss bags the phone as evidence and we move to the closet. But I can't stop thinking about that notebook. About Belle watching Allison for months. Detective Moss's phone rings and she steps into the hallway to take the call. I can hear her voice but not the words. When she comes back and her expression is different, more urgent. The hospital just called. Allison contacted security this morning to report that a woman matching Belle's description approached her in the parking garage yesterday afternoon. Belle asked her invasive questions about her due date, whether she had family support, if she was scared about giving birth alone. Allison felt uncomfortable enough to report it, and security pulled the footage. If Allison hadn't reported it, if she'd trusted Belle's friendly act, Belle might have been there when she went into labor. Detective Moss says Allison probably saved her own baby's life by listening to her instincts. Detective Moss arranges for me to meet Allison at the police station in 2 hours. She wants Allison to confirm that Belle is the woman who's been approaching her. There will be a social worker there too because Allison is only 17, and this whole situation is traumatic enough without making her face it alone. I drive back to Mom's house to shower and change clothes and tell her what we found. She doesn't say much, just sits at the kitchen table holding her coffee cup with both hands. When I leave for the police station, she's still sitting there in the same position. At the station, a social worker named Lorelei meets me in the lobby and takes me to a small conference room. Allison is already there, sitting in a chair with her hands folded over her pregnant belly. She looks so young and scared. She has dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she's wearing a sweatshirt that says Central High. Lorelei introduces us, and I show Allison the photo of Belle on my phone. Allison's face goes pale and she nods immediately. That's her, she says. That's the woman who's been showing up at my prenatal appointments for the past 6 weeks. She always acts like it's a coincidence, like she just happens to be there at the same time. Allison lives in a group home because her family kicked her out when they found out she was pregnant. She's due in 3 weeks and she's terrified. Allison tells us how Belle always seemed so nice and interested, asking about the pregnancy and offering advice. Belle said she was a birth coach and offered to be there when Allison went into labor since Allison would be alone. Allison was actually considering it because she didn't want to go through delivery by herself. But then Belle started asking weird questions about the hospital, about security procedures and which doors had cameras and when the nurses did their rounds. That's when Allison started feeling uncomfortable and stopped responding to Belle's messages. Yesterday, when Belle approached her in the parking garage asking when she was due and which hospital she'd be delivering at, Allison knew something was wrong. Lorelai explains that this is a common pattern. Predators target vulnerable young mothers who lack family support because they're more likely to trust someone offering help. She's seen cases like this before where someone befriends a pregnant woman with the plan to take the baby after birth. Sometimes they wait until the mother is alone in recovery. Sometimes they try to convince the mother to let them help with the delivery, and then disappear with the baby. The fact that Belle was asking about hospital security means she was planning something specific. Hearing it described in these clinical terms makes it even more real and horrible. My sister was hunting a 17-year-old girl. Detective Moss joins us and tells me they traced the contact labeled A in the burner phone. It belongs to someone named Audrey Neal. She used to be a labor and delivery nurse at Riverside Hospital, but her license was suspended 18 months ago for boundary violations with patients. When officers went to her address, neighbors said they haven't seen her in 3 days. Her car is missing too. The landlord mentioned she'd been asking about breaking her lease early, wanted to know if she could get her deposit back if she moved out before the end of the month. Detective Moss shows me a photo of Audrey from her nursing license. She's around 40 with blonde hair and cold eyes. I've never seen her before, but Belle clearly knew her well enough to save her number in a burner phone. Detective Moss pulls up Belle's social media accounts on her computer and starts searching through her message history. She finds a private conversation between Belle and someone named Audrey Neal going back 6 months. The earliest messages are about pregnancy loss and supporting women through difficult births. Belle talks about her miscarriage and how empty she feels. Audrey responds with sympathy and shares stories about helping mothers who need support. But the tone shifts around month 3. Audrey starts using phrases like rescuing babies and giving second chances to children who deserve better. Belle responds enthusiastically, asking questions about how to help. Audrey teaches her how to attend prenatal classes without enrolling, how to make fake appointment cards, where to buy hospital credentials online. The messages get more specific. Belle asks about security cameras and nurse schedules. Audrey sends detailed information about maternity ward layouts and shift changes. They discuss which mothers make the best targets: young, alone, vulnerable. Detective Moss scrolls through months of planning, and I watch over her shoulder feeling sick. My sister wasn't just having a mental breakdown. She was coached by someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Detective Moss makes a phone call, and 20 minutes later we're watching security footage from the hospital where Audrey used to work. The timestamp shows 18 months ago. Audrey walks into the nursery wearing scrubs and picks up a newborn from a bassinet. She cradles the baby and walks toward the exit. A nurse stops her and asks where she's taking the infant. Audrey says the mother requested the baby for feeding. The nurse checks the chart and tells her that's not true. The mother is sleeping and didn't request anything. Audrey's face changes. She insists she's helping because the mother is a drug user and the baby deserves better care. Security arrives and takes the infant from her arms. She's escorted out while screaming about saving innocent children from unfit parents. Detective Moss explains the hospital dropped the charges to avoid publicity. Audrey lost her nursing license but faced no criminal penalties. She was clearly planning something like this for a long time, just waiting for the right opportunity and the right partner. My phone buzzes with a call from Mom. Tyson was just released on bail and showed up at her house. He's wearing an ankle monitor and begging to talk to me. Mom sounds scared and doesn't know what to do. I drive over there and find Tyson sitting on the front porch steps. He stands up when he sees me and starts talking fast. He never thought Belle would actually go through with anything. He thought she was just fantasizing, working through her grief in an unhealthy way. He should have said something, but he was scared and confused and didn't want to believe his girlfriend was capable of something so wrong. I stand on the walkway and don't move closer. I tell him through the screen door that his silence enabled everything happening right now. Every day he stayed quiet was another day Belle got deeper into her delusion. Another day Audrey had to manipulate her. Another day some innocent mother was stalked and targeted. He's crying and saying he's sorry over and over. I tell him I can't look at him right now without feeling sick. I can't process how someone could know something this serious and do nothing. He sits back down on the steps and puts his head in his hands. I go inside and lock the door behind me. Mom is sitting at the kitchen table and she starts crying the moment she sees me. She admits she noticed Belle seemed off during the pregnancy, but convinced herself it was normal mood swings. Belle was always emotional, and Mom thought the hormones were just making it worse. She feels guilty for planning the baby shower and making everything feel more real. All the decorations and gifts and excitement. She worried that her enthusiasm somehow pushed Belle deeper into the delusion, made her feel like she couldn't back out or admit the truth. I sit down next to her and hold her while she sobs. We're both grieving the sister and daughter we thought we knew. The Belle who texted excited messages and sent photos of baby clothes. That person doesn't exist. Or maybe she does exist somewhere under the delusion and the lies. But we can't reach her right now. Mom keeps saying she should have known. She should have seen the signs. I remind her that Belle went to extreme lengths to hide what was happening. Even Tyson, who lived with her, didn't fully understand until it was too late. Detective Moss calls while I'm still at Mom's house. Belle's credit card was just used at a gas station near the Oregon border. Officers are pulling the security footage now. She calls back 15 minutes later with an update. The footage shows Belle with someone wearing scrubs and a baseball cap. Almost certainly Audrey based on her height and build. They're loading boxes into a sedan that matches Audrey's vehicle registration from the DMV. Belle is no longer wearing the fake pregnancy belly. She's in regular clothes and moving quickly, constantly looking around like she's worried about being watched. They fill the trunk with supplies and then go inside the gas station. The timestamp shows this happened 2 hours ago. Detective Moss says Oregon State Police are now involved in the investigation. They're coordinating with local departments to set up surveillance. Detective Moss pulls up more footage from the gas station showing Belle and Audrey inside, studying a map spread across a table in the corner. They're pointing to different routes and writing notes. Audrey traces a path with her finger while Belle nods and takes photos with her phone. They're clearly planning their next move and being careful about it. Detective Moss explains that Oregon authorities are now monitoring the rental property where Belle planned to move in as Ariana Miley. The landlord is a guy named Nicholas Mercer, and he's been incredibly cooperative once he learned what was happening. He agreed to act normal if Belle or Audrey contacts him about picking up keys. Police will be ready to move in when they show up. The net is closing, but Belle doesn't know it yet. She thinks she's still ahead of everyone, still executing her plan to start a new life with a stolen baby. I can't sleep that night. I lie in bed obsessively checking my phone for updates from Detective Moss. Every notification makes my heart jump. I scroll through old text messages from Belle going back months. Just 2 weeks ago, she sent me a photo of a onesie she bought with a caption about how excited she was to be a mom. 3 weeks before that, she complained about back pain and swollen ankles. A month ago, she sent a photo of her ultrasound. Except none of it was real. The ultrasound was purchased online. The onesie was part of her props for the fake life she was building. The complaints about pregnancy symptoms were researched and rehearsed. Every memory now feels tainted by the knowledge of her elaborate lies. I don't know which parts of my sister were real and which parts were performance. I don't know if she loved me or if I was just another person she had to convince. The uncertainty is worse than knowing she did something terrible. At least terrible actions can be understood and processed. But not knowing what was true makes everything feel unstable. Detective Moss arrives at Mom's house early the next morning. Allison went into early labor overnight and delivered a healthy baby girl at 4:23 a.m. Hospital security is on high alert. Allison and her baby are in a private room with restricted access. Only approved visitors can get past the security desk, and plainclothes officers are stationed on the maternity ward. The relief that the baby is born safely is mixed with fear about what Belle might try now. Her entire plan was built around taking Allison's baby. Now that the baby is here, Belle might get desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. Detective Moss assures us they have every entrance covered, and Allison knows not to accept visitors she doesn't recognize. But I can't shake the image of Belle and Audrey studying that map, planning their routes, preparing for exactly this moment. Detective Moss shows us something else they discovered. Belle and Audrey have been monitoring Allison's social media accounts. Allison posted about her upcoming due date 3 weeks ago. She mentioned which hospital she'd be delivering at in a comment thread. She shared photos of her nursery setup at the group home. Every piece of information Belle needed was right there in public posts. Allison's accounts are now locked down and set to private, but the damage is done. Belle knows exactly where to find her target. Detective Moss has stationed plainclothes officers throughout the maternity ward. Some are dressed as visitors, some as hospital staff. They're watching every entrance and monitoring everyone who tries to access the floor. The security footage is being reviewed in real time. If Belle or Audrey show up, they'll be arrested immediately. But the waiting is torture, not knowing when or if they'll make their move. Tyson calls me crying in the afternoon. He found more evidence in his car that he overlooked during the initial search. There's a hospital employee badge maker in the trunk along with blank badge templates. Audrey's photo is printed on several of the templates, ready to be turned into fake IDs. He admits he knew Belle had been meeting with someone but claimed not to know who or why. Belle told him it was a grief counselor and he never questioned it, never asked for details or tried to verify. He just accepted her explanation because it was easier than confronting the truth. I hang up on him before he can finish his excuses. I'm too angry to hear more justifications for his willful ignorance. Every piece of evidence makes it clearer that this could have been stopped earlier if someone had just paid attention. If Tyson had asked questions. If Mom had trusted her instincts. If I had visited more often and noticed the signs. But we all chose comfort over truth, and now we're racing to prevent a tragedy that never should have gotten this far. Detective Moss called me the next morning with news that made my stomach drop. She traced Audrey's phone to a motel 15 miles from the hospital where Allison had her baby. Officers raided the room at dawn, but Belle and Audrey had already cleared out, probably sometime during the night. What they left behind was worse than finding them there. The motel room was like a war room for kidnapping. Detective Moss sent me photos and I had to sit down while looking at them. Detailed floor plans of the maternity ward were spread across one bed, with different colored markers showing nurse stations, security cameras, and blind spots. A schedule was taped to the wall listing nurse shift changes down to the minute. Someone had circled the 3 p.m. shift change in red and written "Best Window" next to it. On the dresser sat a canvas bag stuffed with newborn clothes still with tags on them, 6 bottles of formula, and a stack of forged discharge papers. The papers had Audrey's fake credentials on them and a blank space where a baby's name would go. They'd planned everything down to the smallest detail. These weren't just vague ideas or fantasies anymore. This was an actual operational plan to steal a baby. Detective Moss said the level of planning was unusual for cases like this. Most people who try to take babies act on impulse during a moment of opportunity. But Belle and Audrey had studied that hospital for weeks, maybe months. They knew exactly when to strike and how to get past security. If Allison hadn't reported Belle's weird behavior, if the hospital hadn't increased security, they might have actually succeeded. That thought made me feel sick for hours. Among all the evidence, Detective Moss found something that broke my heart even while it scared me. A journal in Belle's handwriting, the same loopy cursive she'd used since high school. I met Detective Moss at the station to read it because she thought I should see it in person. The entries started normal enough, talking about wanting to be a mother and feeling empty. But they got darker and more twisted as the pages went on. Belle wrote about feeling a connection with Allison's baby, like the universe was sending her signs. She described watching Allison at prenatal appointments and convincing herself that Allison was too young and unprepared. The words "unfit mother" appeared over and over. Belle genuinely believed she would be saving this baby, rescuing it from a bad situation. She wrote about how she'd be a better parent, how she deserved this chance, how it was her destiny to raise this specific child. The last entry was from 2 days ago. Belle wrote that she knew what she was doing was wrong by society's standards, but that sometimes you have to break rules to do the right thing. She compared herself to people who rescue animals from bad owners. She actually thought stealing someone's baby was similar to saving a neglected puppy. Reading her twisted logic made me understand just how sick my sister really was. This wasn't just lying or making bad choices. Belle's brain had completely rewritten reality to justify something horrible. Detective Moss watched me read, and I could tell she'd seen this kind of thing before. She didn't look shocked or disgusted, just sad. Later that afternoon, Detective Moss got a call that changed everything. The Oregon landlord, Nicholas Mercer, reported that someone contacted him asking to move up the key pickup. Instead of 3 days from now, they wanted to get the keys today. Mercer played it cool on the phone and agreed to meet them. Then he immediately called the police like Detective Moss had asked him to. We had them. For the first time since finding those fake belly pads in Belle's closet, we actually had a concrete plan to stop this. Detective Moss coordinated with Oregon State Police to set up a sting operation at the rental property. Officers would be positioned around the area in unmarked cars and plain clothes. Mercer would act completely normal when Belle or Audrey showed up. The plan was to let them pick up the keys and try to enter the property, then move in for arrests. Detective Moss said this would give them the strongest case because it showed clear intent to follow through with the plan. I couldn't just sit at home waiting for news. I told Detective Moss I needed to be there when they caught Belle. She tried to talk me out of it at first, saying it could be dangerous and emotionally difficult, but I pushed back. Belle was my sister, and I'd been the one to discover everything and chase her across 2 states. I deserved to be there at the end. Detective Moss finally agreed to let me wait in an unmarked car 2 blocks from the property. Mom wanted to come too, but I convinced her to stay home. If Belle somehow got away or contacted her, Mom needed to be available. Also, I wasn't sure Mom could handle seeing Belle get arrested. The drive to Oregon felt endless even though it was only 3 hours. Detective Moss drove while I sat in the passenger seat checking my phone every 2 minutes like Belle might text me. She wouldn't, obviously, but I couldn't stop hoping for some message that would explain everything or make it better. Detective Moss tried to make small talk at first but gave up when I could barely respond. My mind kept playing out different scenarios of what would happen when we got there. We arrived at the rental property 3 hours before the scheduled key pickup at 3 p.m. The place was a small duplex in a quiet neighborhood, exactly the kind of anonymous location where someone could disappear with a stolen baby. Detective Moss parked 2 blocks away like she promised, and walked me through the plan one more time. Plainclothes officers were already positioned around the property. Some were sitting in parked cars pretending to read newspapers. Others were dressed like joggers or dog walkers. Nicholas Mercer would be in his property management office acting totally normal. If Belle showed up, I'd have a chance to talk to her before the arrests. Detective Moss thought maybe I could convince Belle to surrender peacefully instead of making things worse. I wasn't sure I could do that, but I agreed to try. Waiting was torture. Detective Moss told me stories about other cases she'd worked to pass the time. She said she'd seen a lot of women who faked pregnancies or tried to steal babies over her career. It usually came from some kind of profound loss or serious mental illness. These women genuinely believed they were doing the right thing, that they deserved a baby more than the real mother did. It didn't excuse what they did, but it helped explain it. Detective Moss said Belle was sick, not evil, and that distinction mattered. I wanted to believe her, but it was hard when I kept thinking about that journal and Belle's twisted logic. At 2:47 p.m., Audrey's car pulled into the property parking lot. My heart started racing so hard I could feel it in my throat. Audrey got out alone, and I could see her looking around nervously. She kept checking her phone and glancing at the street like she expected someone to jump out. She walked toward Mercer's office, and I watched through binoculars as they talked through the window. Mercer was playing his part perfectly, acting casual and friendly. I kept watching for Belle's car, but the lot stayed empty. Maybe Belle wasn't coming. Maybe she'd sent Audrey to get the keys while she stayed hidden somewhere else. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Then Belle's car turned into the lot. She parked far away from Audrey's car, almost at the opposite end. She sat there for several minutes, and I could see her moving her mouth like she was talking to herself, or maybe on the phone. She wasn't wearing the fake pregnancy belly anymore. Without it, she looked smaller and more fragile than I remembered. She looked exhausted and frightened, not like someone about to commit a crime. Despite everything she'd done and planned to do, seeing her like that made me want to run over and hug her and tell her everything would be okay. Belle got out of her car and started walking toward the office. Then she saw me getting out of the unmarked car. She froze in the middle of the parking lot. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across maybe 50 feet of pavement. I could see the exact second she realized what was happening, that this was a trap, and she'd been caught. Her face changed from nervous determination to complete despair. Her shoulders dropped and her mouth opened like she wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I started walking toward her slowly with my hands out where she could see them, trying to look non-threatening. Detective Moss and the other officers held their positions, but I knew they were ready to move if Belle tried to run. Belle started crying before I got halfway to her. She kept saying she was sorry over and over, that she didn't mean for things to go this far. She said she just wanted to be a mom so badly, and she didn't know how to stop once she started lying. I told her I knew, that I loved her, but that she needed help. I said she couldn't take someone else's baby no matter how much she wanted one. The words came out steadier than I felt inside. Belle kept talking through her tears, words spilling out like she'd been holding them in for years. She told me about the miscarriage 2 years ago that nobody knew about, how she'd been 12 weeks along and lost the baby in her apartment bathroom while Tyson was at work. She never told anyone because she felt ashamed, like her body had failed at the one thing it was supposed to do. She watched friends and cousins have babies while she felt empty inside, broken in a way nobody could see. The fake pregnancy started as a small lie to Mom during a phone call, just saying she was expecting to see how the words would feel, and suddenly everyone was so happy and excited that she couldn't take it back. She bought the first belly pad thinking she'd confess before anyone noticed. But the attention and joy felt so good after feeling hollow for so long. By month 4, she was in too deep, ordering bigger pads and learning how to fake symptoms, and the lie became her reality. She truly believed she could make it real somehow, that if she prepared enough and wanted it badly enough, she'd end up with a baby and nobody would know the difference. Movement caught my eye across the parking lot. Audrey had seen the police cars and was sprinting toward her vehicle. 2 officers took off after her and tackled her before she reached the driver's door, her body hitting the pavement hard. She screamed and fought while they put handcuffs on, yelling about how she was trying to help, how young mothers didn't deserve babies they couldn't take care of. Detective Moss walked to Audrey's car and popped the trunk while Audrey kept screaming. Inside was a large black bag that Detective Moss pulled out and unzipped on the hood. Hospital scrubs in multiple sizes, 3 fake ID badges with different names, and Audrey's photo. A detailed floor plan of the hospital maternity ward with shift change times marked in red ink. There were notes about security camera blind spots and which doors had the weakest locks. Detective Moss held up a typed document titled Entry Protocol, with step-by-step instructions for accessing the nursery during the 7 p.m. shift change. Audrey stopped screaming and just glared at all of us, her face twisted with anger instead of shame. She started ranting about saving babies from unfit mothers, about how she knew better than these stupid girls who got pregnant by accident, about how she was doing important work. No regret in her voice at all, just fury that we'd stopped her. Detective Moss walked over to Belle, who was still standing next to me with tears running down her face. Belle held out her hands before Detective Moss even reached for the handcuffs, wrists together like she'd been waiting for this moment. Detective Moss put the cuffs on gently while Belle kept crying, but something in my sister's face looked almost peaceful. She wasn't running anymore, wasn't pretending, wasn't trapped in the lie she'd built around herself. She looked at me and asked me to tell Mom she was sorry for ruining the baby shower. Such a small worry compared to everything else that it made my chest hurt. All those decorations Mom had put up, the cake she'd ordered, the games she'd planned, and Belle was apologizing for missing a party while being arrested for planning to steal a baby. Detective Moss guided Belle toward one of the police cars while other officers dealt with Audrey, who was still yelling about birth rates and undeserving mothers. I watched them put Belle in the back seat and she pressed her face against the window, mouthing, "I'm sorry," over and over. Tyson stood near his car looking like he might throw up, an officer talking to him about coming down to the station for more questions. Nicholas Mercer came out of his office looking shocked, asking Detective Moss what was happening at his rental property. The drive back felt endless even though I followed right behind the police cars. At the police station, they took Belle into an interview room while I sat in the waiting area with Mom, who'd driven up as soon as I called her. She kept crying and asking how she didn't see this, how her daughter fell apart right in front of her and she missed all the signs. Detective Moss came out after an hour and said Belle was giving a full confession, that she was cooperating completely, and seemed almost eager to tell the truth after hiding it for so long. Belle told them everything about the fake pregnancy, about finding Audrey in an online support group for women dealing with pregnancy loss 6 months ago. Audrey had seemed supportive at first, understanding about the grief and the emptiness, but gradually started suggesting that Belle deserved to be a mother more than some careless teenagers did. Audrey planted the idea that taking a baby from a young single mother would actually be helping everyone, giving the baby a better home and saving the young mother from a mistake she wasn't ready for. Belle said Audrey made it sound noble instead of criminal, like they'd be rescuing a child rather than stealing one. Audrey taught her how to fake the medical appointments, where to buy realistic belly pads, how to create fake ultrasound photos using images from pregnancy websites. Audrey had access to the hospital supplies from her nursing job before she got fired, and she knew exactly how maternity wards operated and where their security was weakest. Belle admitted she'd been stalking Allison for 3 weeks after Audrey identified her as the perfect target because she was young, alone, and posting about her pregnancy publicly online. The plan was for Audrey to use her fake credentials to access the maternity ward during shift change, take the baby while nurses were distracted with handoff reports, and meet Belle at a predetermined location. They'd already packed Belle's car with everything needed for a newborn and planned to drive straight to Oregon that night. 2 days later, a police psychiatrist evaluated Belle in a private room at the station. Mom and I waited outside while the evaluation happened, both of us exhausted and numb from everything that had happened. The psychiatrist came out after 3 hours and explained that Belle was experiencing a severe delusional disorder triggered by unresolved grief from her miscarriage. She wasn't a danger to herself, but clearly needed serious mental health treatment that she wouldn't get in regular jail. The psychiatrist recommended a psychiatric facility instead of prison, at least initially, where Belle could get therapy and medication while being monitored. She said Belle's delusion had become so real to her that she genuinely believed she was meant to have Allison's baby, that taking the child would somehow fix the emptiness inside her. Hearing it explained in clinical terms made it feel more manageable somehow, like Belle was sick instead of evil, and sickness could be treated. The prosecutor met with us the next day and explained that Audrey's evaluation had gone very differently. Audrey showed signs of antisocial personality disorder and had a history of manipulating vulnerable women for her own purposes. They'd found records of her contacting at least 4 other women in pregnancy loss support groups over the past year, always with the same pattern of befriending them, and then suggesting they rescue babies from unfit mothers. Audrey had been fired from her nursing job 18 months ago after trying to take a newborn from the hospital nursery, claiming the mother was a drug user who didn't deserve her baby. The hospital had let her resign quietly instead of pressing charges to avoid bad publicity, but she'd clearly been planning something like this ever since. The prosecutor said Audrey would face serious charges including conspiracy to commit kidnapping, identity fraud, stalking, and attempted child abduction. Unlike Belle, Audrey knew exactly what she was doing and showed no mental illness that would make her less responsible for her actions. She was predatory and calculating, targeting grieving women she could manipulate into helping her steal babies. A week later, Detective Moss drove me to the hospital to meet Allison. Lorelei Benedict, the social worker, met us in the lobby and walked us up to the maternity ward. Allison was in a private room holding a tiny baby girl wrapped in a pink blanket, and her face went white with fear when I walked in. Lorelei quickly explained who I was and why we were there, and Allison relaxed a little but kept the baby pulled tight against her chest. I told her I was so sorry for what my sister had done, for the fear and violation she must have felt being stalked and targeted. I promised her that Belle was in custody and would never be able to come near her or her baby, that she was safe now. Allison looked down at her daughter and said something that surprised me. She said she felt sorry for Belle, that even when they'd talked in the parking garage and at prenatal classes, she could tell something was deeply wrong with her. Allison was only 17, but she seemed older somehow, already protective of her baby, but also showing understanding for someone who was clearly suffering. She said she'd decided to name her daughter Hope, because this whole situation made her realize how precious and fragile new life is, how easily things could have gone wrong. She looked at her baby with such fierce love that I felt grateful Belle's plan had failed, that this baby got to stay with her real mother, who already loved her so completely. Lorelei spent the next hour connecting Allison with resources for young mothers, housing assistance through a program for teen parents, childcare support so she could finish school, continued counseling to process the trauma of being stalked. Allison had decided to keep her baby and raise her with support from the group home and social services. She had a plan for getting her GED, then maybe community college while Hope stayed in the group home's childcare center. Watching her talk about her future with such determination made me see how wrong Belle's twisted logic had been. Allison wasn't an unfit mother who needed saving. She was a young woman who loved her baby and deserved support, not judgment or theft. 3 weeks after Belle's arrest, the prosecutor met with me, Mom, and our lawyer to discuss charges. Because of Belle's mental health evaluation and complete lack of criminal history, they were offering a deal where she'd be committed to a psychiatric facility for treatment instead of going to prison. The terms were strict, though. She'd have to stay in the facility for a minimum of 2 years, participate fully in all therapy and treatment, take prescribed medications, and face criminal charges if she didn't comply or committed any other offenses. After treatment, she'd be on supervised release with regular check-ins and continued mental health monitoring. The prosecutor said this was the best option for everyone because Belle genuinely needed help more than punishment, and a trial would be hard on Allison, who was just trying to start her life with her new baby. Mom and I sat in the prosecutor's office the next week, both of us exhausted from sleepless nights trying to figure out what to do. Detective Moss joined us, pulling up a chair and explaining how a trial would work. She said Allison would have to testify about being stalked and targeted, relive all the fear she felt. Belle's mental health records showed clear signs of delusional thinking, which meant any jury would likely send her to psychiatric care anyway, instead of prison. The prosecutor laid out papers showing Belle's evaluation results, pointing to specific diagnoses that supported treatment over punishment. Mom kept asking if Belle would actually get help or just be locked away, and the prosecutor promised the facility specialized in exactly what Belle needed. I thought about Allison holding baby Hope, about how she'd already been through so much, and I couldn't imagine making her sit in a courtroom and face Belle again. We signed the papers accepting the plea deal that afternoon, both of us crying in the parking lot afterward. 2 days later, I got a call about Tyson's charges. His lawyer tried arguing he was manipulated by Belle, that he didn't understand what was happening. But the prosecutor pulled up text messages showing Tyson knew about the fake pregnancy for months, knew Belle was planning something with those hospital supplies, and chose to stay quiet. He threw away evidence at the gas station, tried to steer us away from security footage at the hospital, and never once called police even when things got obviously dangerous. The prosecutor offered him a deal involving 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling sessions twice a month. Tyson's lawyer advised him to take it, because a trial could mean actual jail time for obstruction and accessory charges. I heard through Mom that he accepted the deal, broke down crying when signing the papers. Part of me felt bad for him, but mostly I just felt angry that his silence enabled everything Belle did. Belle got transferred to a psychiatric facility 3 hours away, a place that looked more like a college campus than a hospital. Mom and I drove up to visit once Belle was settled, going through multiple security checkpoints and signing in at the main desk. They led us to a common room with soft furniture and plants by the windows. Belle walked in wearing regular clothes instead of a hospital gown, her hair pulled back and her face clean of makeup. She looked smaller somehow, less like the sister I knew and more like a stranger. She sat across from us and immediately started crying, saying she was sorry over and over. Mom reached across and held her hand while Belle talked about not fully understanding what happened to her. She said the medication made things clearer, made her see how wrong and scary her actions were. She knew she hurt people, knew she scared Allison and put a baby in danger, and she wanted help to figure out why her brain went to such a dark place. The visit lasted an hour and Belle cried through most of it, but there were moments where I saw glimpses of my real sister underneath all the delusion and planning. Before we left, a psychiatrist asked to speak with us privately. She was an older woman with gray hair and a kind face, and she explained Belle's diagnosis in terms we could actually understand. Belle's delusion started as a way to cope with losing a baby 2 years ago, a miscarriage nobody knew about because Belle hid it from everyone. After that, she found out she couldn't have kids naturally, some problem with her body that doctors said would make pregnancy nearly impossible. Instead of processing that grief and loss, Belle's brain created the fake pregnancy as a way to experience the joy and attention she desperately wanted. The psychiatrist said Belle's treatment would focus on working through the grief she'd been avoiding, learning to tell the difference between reality and fantasy and delusion, and building better ways to handle painful feelings. She said Belle would be in the facility for at least 2 years, maybe longer depending on her progress. I started seeing my own therapist 3 weeks after Belle's transfer. The first session I just cried and talked about how betrayed I felt, how my sister lied to everyone for months and planned something so terrible. My therapist listened and then said something that surprised me. She said I could love Belle and be angry at her at the same time, that those feelings didn't cancel each other out. I could grieve the sister I thought I had while still supporting the real sister who needed help. That made something click in my brain, like permission to feel complicated things instead of picking one emotion. Over the next few weeks, we talked about trust and boundaries, about how to support someone without enabling them. I learned that Belle's mental illness explained her actions but didn't excuse them, that she still made choices even while her brain was lying to her. The therapy helped me sleep better at night, helped me stop obsessively checking my phone for updates about Belle or Allison. Mom struggled harder than I did with everything. She kept saying she should have noticed something was wrong, should have asked more questions when Belle seemed off during the pregnancy. I reminded her that Belle bought fake ultrasound photos, wore pregnancy bellies that looked completely real, and even Tyson, who lived with her, didn't fully understand what was happening. We started going to family therapy sessions at Belle's facility once a month. The therapist there taught us how to set healthy boundaries while offering support, how to visit Belle without taking responsibility for her choices. Mom slowly started accepting that she couldn't have prevented Belle's breakdown, that sometimes people hide their pain so well that nobody can see it coming. 3 months into Belle's treatment, the facility sent us a progress report. Belle was participating in all her therapy sessions, taking her medications consistently, and showing real understanding of what she'd done. She'd written a letter to Allison apologizing for stalking her, for making her feel unsafe, for planning to take her baby. The letter took responsibility without making excuses, acknowledged the fear and violation Allison must have felt. I called Lorelai to ask if we should send it, and she said Allison wasn't ready to hear from Belle yet. Allison was focused on her baby and her future, and hearing from Belle might set back her healing. Belle accepted this when we told her, said she understood that getting better didn't mean people had to forgive her. That acceptance seemed like real progress, like she was finally living in reality instead of the fantasy world she'd created. Around that same time, Audrey's trial started. Belle's lawyer said Belle wouldn't have to testify because they had so much physical evidence and digital messages. The prosecutor had the fake IDs, the hospital floor plans, all those text messages between Belle and Audrey planning the abduction. Security footage showed Audrey at the hospital during her suspension, proved she'd been accessing restricted areas. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and I followed the news coverage online. Audrey's lawyer tried arguing she was mentally ill too, but the psychiatrists who evaluated her said she had antisocial personality disorder and knew exactly what she was doing. She showed no remorse during testimony, kept insisting she was trying to save babies from bad mothers. The jury found her guilty on 7 different felony counts, including conspiracy to commit kidnapping, identity fraud, and stalking. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in prison, and during sentencing, he talked about how predatory her actions were. He said she targeted vulnerable women who were already struggling, tried to exploit their situations for her own twisted purposes. Reading about the sentencing made me feel relieved that Audrey couldn't hurt anyone else for a long time. I got a letter from Tyson about 4 months after everything happened. He was doing his community service at a nonprofit that helped families dealing with mental health crises, and he wrote about how the work made him see his failures clearly. He said he'd been a coward, choosing comfortable denial over difficult truth. He knew Belle was struggling, and instead of getting her help, he just looked the other way and hoped things would work out. His silence enabled her delusion to grow until she was planning to steal a baby, and he would carry that guilt forever. The letter asked for nothing from me, didn't beg for forgiveness or make excuses. He just wanted me to know he understood what he'd done wrong, and was trying to become someone who wouldn't make those same choices again. I appreciated the honesty even though I wasn't ready to forgive him. Maybe someday I would be, but right now the anger still felt too fresh. 6 months after Belle's commitment, her treatment team called with an update. Belle was doing really well in therapy, had worked through a lot of her grief about the miscarriage and infertility in healthy ways. She could clearly tell the difference between her delusions and reality now, understood how sick she'd been during the fake pregnancy. The biggest news was that Belle had started a support group within the facility for women dealing with pregnancy loss. She was using her own painful experience to help others process their grief before it turned into something dangerous like it had for her. The treatment team said this was a really good sign, showed Belle was channeling her pain into something positive and real, instead of hiding behind lies and fantasy. They thought she might be ready for supervised day passes in another 6 months if she kept making progress. Mom cried happy tears when she heard that news, and I felt hopeful for the first time in months that Belle might actually come out of this okay. A few weeks after that visit, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a photo of a chubby baby with bright eyes and the biggest smile, sitting up in someone's lap. The message below said it was from Allison, and this was Hope at 6 months old. The baby looked nothing like the tiny, fragile newborn I'd seen in the hospital that day, all wrapped up and vulnerable. This baby looked healthy and happy and loved. Allison's message went on to say she'd finished her GED last month and enrolled in community college classes starting in the fall. Hope stayed at the group home's childcare center while Allison attended her classes and studied in the evenings. She was taking general education courses and thinking about maybe becoming a teacher or social worker someday. Reading her message made me feel something lift in my chest, knowing that despite everything Belle had put her through, Allison was building a real life for herself and her daughter. She was proving that being a young mom didn't mean failure or giving up on your future. I showed the photo to Mom, and we both cried happy tears, grateful that at least this part of the story had turned out okay. The prosecutor called me about a month later with news about Belle's case. She'd been reviewing Belle's progress reports from the facility and talking with her treatment team. Based on Belle's consistent improvement and full participation in therapy, the prosecutor agreed to modify her commitment from indefinite to 2 years, with supervised outpatient treatment afterward. Belle would have to register with mental health services in whatever county she lived in, maintain regular therapy appointments twice a week for the first year, and then weekly after that, and stay on her medication without any lapses. But she would eventually be able to rebuild her life outside the facility, get a job, maybe even have her own apartment with proper supervision. The prosecutor explained that this kind of modification was rare, but Belle's case was unique because she'd shown genuine insight into her illness and real commitment to recovery. It felt like the first real hope we'd had since this whole nightmare began. the first sign that maybe Belle could actually have a future beyond just being defined by what she almost did. Mom and I drove to the facility for Belle's birthday in early October. We brought a small chocolate cake from the bakery Belle used to love, and cards we'd both picked out carefully, trying to find ones that felt appropriate for the situation. The visiting room was bright and clean with big windows and comfortable chairs, nothing like the cold institutional spaces I'd imagined. Belle walked in looking healthier than she had in years, maybe healthier than she'd looked even before the fake pregnancy started. Her skin had color in it, and her eyes were clear and focused in a way they hadn't been during those months when she was living in her delusion. She'd gained a little weight in a good way, looked less hollow and stressed. We sang happy birthday quietly, and cut the cake while Belle told us about the grief support group she'd started leading at the facility. She talked about wanting to volunteer with grief support groups in the community someday after her release, using her own painful experience to help other people before they reached the point of crisis she had. She wanted to catch people early, when they first experienced loss, and give them healthy tools for processing it instead of letting it fester into something dangerous like it had for her. Belle asked about Allison and Hope during our visit, her voice careful and a little scared, like she wasn't sure she had the right to ask. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo Allison had sent. Belle stared at it for a long time and then started crying, but not in a delusional way like before. These were different tears, clear and genuine and full of real understanding. She said she was grateful the baby was with her real mother, that she could see now how wrong and harmful her delusions had been. She talked about the work she was doing in therapy to forgive herself, while also accepting that some people might never forgive her, and that was their right. She understood that Allison didn't owe her anything, not forgiveness or understanding or even acknowledgement. Belle said her therapist had helped her see that true remorse meant accepting consequences without expecting anything in return, and she was trying to learn how to live with that weight while still moving forward. Detective Moss called me about a week after Belle's birthday to let me know she was officially closing the case. All the paperwork was filed, all the reports were complete, and there were no loose ends left to tie up. But she said she wasn't calling just about the paperwork. She wanted to check on how we were all doing, how Belle was progressing, how Mom and I were handling everything. She told me this case had reminded her why she became a detective in the first place, that it wasn't just about catching criminals and closing cases. It was about helping families navigate impossible situations and hopefully preventing tragedies before they happened. She said she was genuinely glad Belle was getting real help instead of just punishment, that sometimes the system actually worked the way it was supposed to work. She'd seen too many cases where mental illness got treated as pure criminality, and people who needed help just got locked up without any real treatment. Before we hung up, she made me promise to call her if our family ever needed anything, and I could tell she meant it. A year after Belle's commitment, her treatment team called to say she'd been granted supervised day passes. She could leave the facility for up to 8 hours at a time as long as she stayed with an approved family member and followed all the rules. Mom and I decided to start having Belle over for Sunday dinners, giving her a taste of normal family life again while still maintaining the structure she needed. The first dinner was awkward as hell, all of us sitting around Mom's dining table trying to figure out how to talk to each other. We kept dancing around the elephant in the room, making small talk about the weather and what was on TV, nobody wanting to bring up anything real. But gradually, over the following weeks, we found our rhythm again. Belle started being more honest about her struggles in therapy, talking openly about the days when she felt the pull of old delusions trying to creep back in. She didn't hide behind lies or pretend everything was perfect. Mom and I learned to ask direct questions, and Belle learned to give direct answers, even when those answers were uncomfortable. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before, but it was more real, and somehow that made it better. Lorelai contacted me in the spring with an update about Allison. She'd graduated from community college with her associate degree and got accepted to a nursing program at the state university with a full scholarship that covered tuition and books. Allison had specifically asked Lorelai to let me know because she wanted me to understand that while she'd never forget what happened, she'd chosen to focus on building her future, rather than staying stuck in fear. Hope was thriving, hitting all her developmental milestones and showing signs of being a smart, curious kid. Allison was proving every single day that she was exactly the mother her daughter needed, that age and circumstances didn't determine your ability to love and care for a child. Lorelai said Allison talked sometimes about maybe working in maternal health someday, helping other young mothers navigate the system and access resources. She was taking something terrifying that happened to her and finding a way to transform it into purpose. 2 years after everything fell apart, our family had found a new normal that was more honest even if it was more complicated. Belle completed her facility treatment and moved into a supervised apartment with 2 other women in recovery, all of them checking in daily with a case manager and attending group therapy twice a week. She got a part-time job at a grief counseling center, answering phones and helping with intake paperwork, using her experience in a productive way while maintaining her own recovery. Mom and I rebuilt our relationship with Belle based on truth instead of comfortable illusions, setting clear boundaries about what we could and couldn't handle while still offering support when she needed it. I learned that loving someone means accepting their reality, not the version you wish existed, and that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. Belle carries the weight of what she almost did every single day, but she's chosen to transform that weight into purpose by helping others navigate loss before it becomes delusion like it did for her. Our family is smaller now because Tyson is permanently out of our lives, and some extended relatives can't accept what happened, but we're stronger for being built on honesty instead of pretense. I still have hard days when I remember finding those fake pregnancy bellies in Belle's closet, and realizing my sister was capable of something so scary. But I also have good days when I see Belle laughing genuinely at Sunday dinner, and know she's finally living in reality instead of fantasy. The baby shower decorations are long gone from Mom's house, replaced by the messy, imperfect work of supporting someone through real recovery. And somehow that feels more meaningful than any celebration we could have thrown for a pregnancy that was never real in the first place. So yeah, that's the whole thing. Nothing scripted, just me talking through it the way I'd tell a friend. Thanks for hanging out. I always appreciate when people stick around to the end. Come back next time if you feel like catching up.